reunited and it feels so good. Reunited 'cause we understood there's one perfect fit, and sugar, this one is it. We're both so excited 'cause we're reunited. Hey, hey. Ladies and gentlemen, you've not turned into a bad AM station. You have turned into the Vox podcast.
That's right.
With Andy and Mike in the same room.
Wow.
Andy has flown out to the great state of Ohio and is making his Filipino presence known through socks and shirt combos that have no business in the Midwest. And so, you know, thanks to Mercedes, his wife, and his family for letting him come out.
Number one.
But I just want to quote the first stanza of Reunited. I was saying the chorus. I was a fool to ever leave your side. Me minus you is such a lonely ride. The breakup we had has made me lonesome and sad. I realize I love you because I want you back. Well, no. Yeah. Okay, so really just the first couple of lines. I didn't mean the rest. So my brothers and sisters, holy cow, we're in the same room. Andy has flown out to Ohio to set up the podcast stuff that he sent out in the minivan as we drove across country, and to set us up on Skype so we can preach on the Vox community Sunday morning gatherings, and we just have some better sound quality. Although I heard you guys were really big fans of the chair that was squeaking last time I recorded something. So love that. But I've got all sorts of fancy stuff. And so thank you for your support. Thanks for kind of hanging out during this time. We're trying to get our ducks in a row. Don't know what that means or why that's an expression, but we're getting our ducks in a row. Thanks for waiting for us to do that. We are recording on a Friday night. It is 9:34 in the East as we are recording. Seth Erie's on his way to sleep. Hannah's watching Probably So You Think You Can Dance, which is demonic. And
or the new Taylor Swift video.
I haven't seen that one yet. But you know, it's just nice. It's just nice that T Swift has some more stuff coming out. It's been too long.
It's been too long.
And what's the song? Look at what you made me do.
Look at what you made me do.
Yeah,
it's definitely not Shake It Off. That's for sure.
Yeah, it seems a little darker.
It seems like she couldn't shake it off.
Right. Yeah, she didn't shake it off at all. In fact, it's grown into some sort of like darkness.
Fungus and darkness.
So anyway, Andy, give me your impressions of Columbus, Ohio, just briefly, during your 4 hours here so far.
Apparently I experienced the most traffic that exists here, which actually surprised me when I came. I thought there would be less traffic.
Yeah, but did you notice it's because the roads are so freaking narrow?
Oh yeah.
So the surface streets in California are bigger than the freeways in Ohio.
Sure. Definitely.
So that's part of the issue.
Totally. And part of it reminded me of driving in New Jersey too. I mean, it's just like turn and loop and there's so many different road changes I took just to get here.
That's right.
But yeah, tons of green. It's
lots of green.
Super beautiful. I happened to show up on the first day of fall. Apparently it's
fall weather.
Fall weather.
I mean, it's September 1st and it's like, holy moly, all of a sudden it went from, 80 degrees to like 57 and cloudy, and it was so nice today and windy, and it was like, ooh,
yeah,
this is called weather.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was nice. I mean, I was coming from like 90 something in San Clemente or in San Juan, so
which means it would be the Braille World headquarters.
It was like 105. Baking. Like I heard, like inland, that like Placentia, Brea, Fullerton area is like over 100. So
for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about, Southern California, people, literally the question we get asked most when we meet people in Ohio is, why would you move here? And we tell them we came from California, and they double down on that and look at us like we're absolutely dumb to have made this move. So we'll see how it's going in February, and maybe I'll be visiting Andy at that point.
Yeah.
So what we want to do. Andy promised a heavyweight episode, which I think was a shot at my weight. I want to talk about something that has captured the imagination of the Twitterverse. It's not, we don't have enough to be outraged about. So the kind folks at the Coalition for Biblical Sexuality did us a favor this week to take our it was a very gracious favor to take our minds off of the tragedy in Houston and the flooding. They put out a series of affirmations and denials about human sexuality. And so immediately, the Twitterverse exploded into very predictable camps. You can argue that all it did is just solidify each position. I mean, it didn't do anything to build. But of course, we got asked about our take. And so if you're listening to this episode and you've got a computer nearby or a smartphone, it may be worth reading the Nashville Statement. It's online, and you can find it. And then a group of very progressive folks wrote the Denver Statement to counter that, and a bit sarcastically. And then I'm going to write the Suburban Columbus, Ohio Statement, which we'll just talk about the how many white people there are in Ohio. We'll have the Suburban Columbus, Ohio Statement on race relations.
Oh, there you go.
So obviously, we've got asked about this, in our church. We've got asked about this all over the place. So no one's waiting for our super hot take on this, but I think a discussion is warranted because it illustrates so many of the themes that we've been discussing over the past year and a half. And so I want to. I need to give some disclaimers before we dive in. So the Coalition for Biblical Sexuality is actually a sub section of something called the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, which was formed, I believe, in 1987 to counter the rise of feminism. Now, one of the great arguments that I've heard used against my position that women can hold any role in the church is that invariably leads to the acceptance of homosexuality. So it's not surprising that a group very concerned with the former would also issue a statement on the latter.
Oh, that's interesting.
And when I read through the signees, at least the initial signees, I mean, it's kind of a who's who of Reformed evangelical circles. And with some other folks from various backgrounds who are certainly not Reformed. And there's some folks on there that I consider friends and mentors.
Sure.
So, I want to tread lightly on, the people, some of the people that signed this, I have a great deal of respect for. But I would disagree. And if ever I were asked, not that anyone has or will, I could not in good conscience either sign the Nashville Statement or the Denver Statement, which if you want to read, that's out there too. So neither one I would feel comfortable with. And I want to talk about a little bit, I want to talk about why that is, but I want to focus primarily on the Nashville Statement. And now I have to, because here's the Nashville Statement, and my take on it is that it's not about defending a traditional view of sexuality. It's actually about something far more subtle and nuanced, that is the spirit of the age, in their words, of Reformed circles, namely the idea that we need to maintain the boundaries of faith. And so they've elevated human sexuality and certain views of it to, at least in their language, to some of the great creedal statements regarding the incarnation of Jesus and the deity of Jesus. And so we'll fuss at that in a little bit, but I need to give some disclaimers. So first disclaimer is there's some folks on here I have a great deal of respect for. Secondly, there's some folks on here I cannot stand their ideas. I cannot stand the way they present their ideas. I cannot stand the outworking of their ideas. And that goes for the whole organization of the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I cannot stand their work. For reasons that you could probably figure out if you've listened for any length of time. I'm against a lot of Reformed theology, and I'm very much against a lot of complementarian theology. And so the fact that this was, this was the organization that put out the statement immediately, I roll my eyes and look for things to not like. So I confess that. the timing of it was interesting, and I know the timing of it was set, many months ago. But it after Charlottesville and in the middle of all the flooding in Houston, it kind of reinforces the tone deafness of this, because I mean, I've heard so many people just say, evangelicals don't care about race, they don't care about justice, they don't care about poverty, but they certainly care about who you're attracted to and who you sleep with.
Right.
And that just kind of, that trope sort of was reinforced by the timing of the statement. And then granted, I mean, the people that would disagree with the statement, no matter when it was released, are going to have a fit.
Sure.
But it was just like this subtle, really? We couldn't have waited a week on this or whatever.
To me, it felt like there was this funeral going on in a church somewhere, and all of a sudden they break through the back doors with this statement down the aisle.
Yes.
Like that's what it felt like to me.
About nothing that had to do with the funeral.
Exactly. Like that. Exactly. And it was just like that's what I've been most upset about.
Yes.
It's just that is so much of that anyways.
So somebody tweeted, evangelicalism, where leaders are more concerned with homosexuality and abortion than racism, abuse of women, and the poor. And that just sort of feeds that stereotype, right? We're the quickest to condemn the sins we don't struggle with. Mm-hmm. I also want to admit at the outset that I do think there is a crisis in the church about the issues that are brought up in the statement. I mean, I think there's very little guidance in the way of transgenderism, the very little guidance, to use their word, very little guidance about navigating the waters of folks that seem to be very faithfully Jesus following and yet are solidified in an orientation that for 2,000 years has, been either the orientation itself or the actions that flowing from the orientation have been regarded as sinful. And so I get the power of the creeds. I mean, the first creed in the New Testament was Jesus is Lord. And the second creed seems to be this thing that Paul quotes about, Jesus was crucified according to the scriptures. He was buried according to the scriptures. He was risen again on the third day according to the scriptures. And so it's the 1 Corinthians 15. So creeds, I mean, are super important clarifications. They're summaries. They historically have provided very helpful guidance on some issues, but I just think this one kind of misses the mark on some things. So because these issues are so important, I find the statement unhelpful. That it's not because I don't think the issues are important and worthy of a statement. No. It's because I think they're super important. A statement doesn't do them justice.
Right.
In California, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, there was this big prop called Prop 8, Proposition 8, which was about, was it gay marriage?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And so this was before, the issue had risen to federal levels. And our church just didn't say anything about it. We got so much heat from people about, not telling anybody how to vote. And I remember thinking and saying on more than one occasion, God's view of sexuality cannot be contained or expressed in an up or down vote on a proposition, and so we're not going to take stances. And so I'm against stancing more and more in our polarized society. Public proclamations without nuance, without conversation, without incarnation, and face-to-face dialogue, I don't think help anything anymore. And so I'm off the bus the minute you just start doing statements in any direction. So those are all my disclaimers. So makes sense so far, Andy?
Yeah.
So I've got issues, no question about it. And granted, statements can be helpful, but I think people already know that evangelical conservatives are against homosexuality and are very much for the binary male and female sort of equation, and are very much against gay marriage. And so I'm not sure, unless this is addressed to Christians, I don't know why a statement like this, I don't know what this does.
Right.
Now, maybe it is addressed to Christians, and we'll talk about if that's true. But the issue that we've discussed many times in the podcast is the issue of being center-focused versus boundary-focused. Boundary-focused organizations are very interested and invested in the lines of who's in and who's out, and whatever line you give, whether it's baptism or speaking in a foreign tongue, an unknown tongue, whether it's becoming a member of your church, whatever line you give to be a part of your community. The issue isn't whether or not there are lines. There are lines in every community, or it's not a community. The issue is what you do with those lines and how you use them. Boundary focus groups use them to exclude and to provide security for people who are insecure regarding their own standing in the group. Now, that's not always true, and there are certain cases where boundaries are necessary, and there are boundaries in the New Testament. Not an issue. I don't have an issue with boundaries, but I do have an issue with organizations that are boundary focused and spend the majority of their time delineating who's in and who's out. And we've found very much more compelling a different vision for something called being center focused, which is, and it's the difference, as we've said, between building fences or building wells. You can raise and keep cattle on land one of two ways. You can build fences so they can't wander off, or you can build a well where they will want to be in the middle of wherever the water is. And so I've always seen Jesus, and I've seen his church, and I've seen what we want to be about in terms of being center focused, where the community is made up of all those oriented towards the center, no matter how far away they actually are. Mm-hmm. So somebody's oriented and becoming oriented to Jesus, who has no church background, is an atheist, but there's some spark, there's something. Well, they're considered part of the group because they're oriented to the center. Whereas you can be really close and considered part of the in-group, according to the boundary lines, but in actuality, you're oriented away from the center.
Right,
you would not be considered part of the group. And so the biggest issue I have with statements like this, particularly the way they do these affirmations and denials, is they are so delineating boundaries that you cannot help, even if you're sympathetic to the theology that's represented, you cannot help get into an us versus them mode. Mm-hmm. That's what boundaries do. That's their purpose. And we'll see, I think there's a very sinister attachment to this statement regarding, well, who's a true Christian and who's not,
right?
And we're gonna beat the crap out of that. So to me, I don't understand why reinforce a position that everyone knows is held by conservative evangelicals. There's no wisdom or counsel attached to it. So imagine if you're a 13-year-old boy. You find yourself attracted to other boys, and your youth pastor just reads this statement to you of affirmations and denials. Now, I don't know that anyone would really do that, but just imagine the harm.
What scares me is the fact that I feel like that's more likely to happen now.
Well, I mean, it's just, can you imagine? I just can't imagine. It's like, yeah.
Anyways.
You can't help but play us versus them. So if I don't sign this, I'm a slave to the spirit of the age. Statements change how we have conversations.
Yeah.
So now, instead of having a dialogue between respectful, mutually reciprocal camps in the church, now there's a line in the sand. Mm-hmm. And you're either with us or against us.
Right.
And I just think that is so unwise. Regarding this issue, but I think even more so regarding most issues these days. I just think in our polarized, social media-driven age, these internal discussions have to be held internally. Just at releasing this into the public sphere, I just think does nothing but make our job harder for those of us who genuinely want to love, respect, serve, and bring good news to the LGBTQ community. It's just our job has been made that much harder. I also think that it's one of those things where we're trying to narrow who the true Christians are. And yes, there's a purpose to that, right? Jesus is Lord was one of the ways you did that, and baptism was one of the ways you did that back in the day. And but why this issue as opposed to other really big moral issues of our day?
Oh yeah, and divorce isn't even mentioned on it.
I know. Yeah,
I'm sure we're going to get there.
We're just going to beat up on that too.
But I mean, to your point though, we can make the same statement. What about greed? Let's look at how much greed is destroying, lives of so many people. But yet, what's out there?
Right.
No one's like carrying a banner.
So if we want to do Nashville statements on a whole bunch of issues, well, that's at least consistent.
Right.
But to just pick this thing and to ignore our support of Trump in the evangelical community, our blessing of divorce and adultery in a lot of communities, the rampant pornography, you just go, really? Mm-hmm. So, all right, we'll get to that. Andy, don't stop.
Well,
okay. So here's what we first series of statements was disclaimers.
Yeah.
Second series of statements was about why statements are problematic. Okay.
Well, you're making a statement about statements.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the joy. That's anytime you read an article on social media about how unhealthy social media is, that's what we're doing. We're making statements about how bad statements are. Perfect.
We're making a stance on statements about not making stances.
Exactly.
About statements.
Which sounds perfectly consistent. All right, I'm going to give
That's what we do here.
And this is going to be rambly, guys. I'm going to give you 11 reasons why I cannot stand this thing.
And this will be fun to measure the difference between a 9:30 a.m. podcast we do versus a 9:30 p.m. podcast.
Yes.
I'm sure that's going to play a role here.
Absolutely. This will be much longer. No question about it. All right. So, things I dislike. And again, no one's asking. Well, a few people have asked, but not like, this isn't some hot take. But I just think it's interesting because it addresses our public witness on these issues. So, reason number one, I dislike this and wouldn't sign it. There is absolutely no public confession about our complicity. That's my wife. She's going to pick up Nate, now a high schooler. Goodbye, Mama. At 10 o'clock at a party.
Yeah.
Oh man.
He is full teen.
I'm talking zits. I'm talking hair in regions that are interesting. I'm talking primarily underarms. Thank you. I'm talking just like the rolling of the eyes. Oh, it's in full blossom. It's awesome. And the nice thing is I can still out obnoxious him. So as obnoxious and sarcastic as I can go bigger.
Yeah.
I can go bigger.
That's without a doubt.
Yeah. So I still got him. All right. Anyway, the thing I dislike, number one, is there's absolutely no confession or acknowledgement of the need for repentance for the harm that we have done in Jesus' name to the LGBTQ community, to the kids that haven't been loved, to the marriages that have been walked away from, to and again, let's just assume for the sake of argument that they're right, that this theology is correct. Okay.
All right.
I would still just have all sorts of issues. You cannot, according to Jesus, judge the world without first acknowledging the log in your own freaking eye. And to sit there and to just make pronouncements about who is a faithful witness to Jesus and who is not, without any acknowledgement of the harm that Christians have done in the name of Jesus, and using some of this theology. I think it's absolutely crazy. There's no, Jesus was so clear. You have to take care of the log in your own eye if you're going to judge everybody else. So the fact that we have allowed and we've contributed, we have in the name of Jesus called gays terrible names. We've resisted. Some of us resisted AIDS research and funding when the disease first hit. I mean, we're known primarily as anti-gay. I mean, we have not represented Jesus well. I don't know how anybody would say that we've represented Jesus well to the gay community. I just don't think you can say it. And to just have a series of pronouncements that is going to be viewed as antagonizing and hateful, whether or not they're right or not, without any sense of our complicity in creating the mess that exists, I find that absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. I can't, it blows my mind. If judgment begins with the house of God, then the statement like this, a Nashville statement about the rightness and wrongness of morality and sexuality, has to start with how our own house is a mess. And so I just stop there. I mean, if that were the only reason, that would be enough for me to just be against it. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, there's no warmth, no compassion, no empathy. There's no guidance. I mean, it's cold, formulaic. And when you're talking about issues of belief, okay, I get that, right? Jesus is he's very God of God. He is the only begotten. I mean, yes, all this technicality of language. Okay, perfect. But when you're dealing with issues of sexuality, which seem far more personal, to just have a cold, affirmation and denial, I don't think it helps. Mm-hmm. It doesn't present, this is still under disliking number one, the tone of it. It doesn't present any vision or compassion for LGBTQ people, other than chastity outside of marriage, which is not in any way, shape, or form a summary of the Bible's teaching on human sexuality. No way. There's chastity in marriage, number one. I mean, that's the first problem, is there's a bunch of chastity in marriage. You don't use your spouse for sexual gratification. You actually seek to gratify them. The chastity of guarding your heart against emotional affairs, guarding your eyes against pornography, the chastity that requires, I mean, come on, give me a break. But there's no vision or compassion for LGBTQ people, which is totally consistent with what we've done with like even straight kids, because we just tell them, no, just stay away, don't, it's bad. And there's no vision that accompanies that. And so in that way, it's totally consistent with what we've done. And that's one of the reasons why our house is such a mess, is that there's no compelling vision to this. There's no picture of human flourishing. See, I mean, and that's the thing, Andy, I'm jumping ahead in my notes, but this doesn't address the primary objection that I see from people regarding the ethic presented in this statement, the traditional biblical teaching. Namely, that the traditional biblical teaching actually is harmful to gay people. It harms them. It increases suicide and rates of depression. There's nothing in here addressing that issue. I mean, so just sitting and pronouncing and thinking that our rightness is enough, man, I just think all this does is make the mess worse. And it divides what should be a unified witness on far more pressing issues in the church. So now, if I don't sign it, I am a liberal. I'm a whatever, right? I'm out of the group,
or not a Christian,
or not a Christian. Yes. I mean, so you have like here's Article 1 of the Nashville. We affirm that God has designed marriage to be a covenantal, sexual, procreative, lifelong union of one man, one woman, as husband and wife, and is meant to signify the covenant love between Christ and his bride, the church. Yes, we deny that God has designed marriage to be a homosexual, polygamous, polyamorous, I think, relationship. We also deny that marriage is a mere human contract rather than a covenant made before God. Okay, so it doesn't speak, it only speaks against homosexuality, polygamy, the other one that I couldn't pronounce.
Polymority.
Right. But it doesn't mention divorce, doesn't mention infertility, doesn't mention any of the ways that through no fault of your own or through your fault you fall short of that. It just singles out one specific issue. And you just go, okay, but does that really summarize the biblical view of sex? Where's pleasure in that, right? When you have an erotic poem like Song of Songs that celebrates the pleasure, just the sheer bodily pleasure of sexuality, or the deep companionship, or the friendship that comes, it just feels thin. And I highlight that just to highlight the fact that if all you're going to say to LGBTQ people as a result of a statement like this is, okay, be chaste, that I don't think that captures, first of all, the pastoral responsibility we have, but also the theological depth of the biblical teaching on sexuality. Make sense?
Yep.
Oh, and I just don't see what it costs us to apologize. I just don't see what it costs us to acknowledge there's been real harm done to the LGBTQ community in the name of Jesus. I just don't see what that costs us.
Right.
All right. Number 2, they've broadened the definition of orthodoxy beyond doctrine to ethics, which is a big deal. So orthodoxy has traditionally been considered a series of affirmations about Jesus, the Bible, salvation. But now we've added an ethical category about your view of marriage, which raises a fascinating question. Well, why not your view of war, or your view of violence, or your view of poverty? It's to add to orthodoxy is bad enough, but then what they chose to do, it seems highly arbitrary. Because the reason they give is, well, this is a really pressing issue. The spirit of the age is really okay, and I agree it's a pressing issue. But you haven't yet given us a reason why this issue and not others, like greed and poverty, like race, like justice, like the evangelical support of Trump and the wedding of evangelical Christianity with politics and conservative politics, right? I mean, those issues, it just feels arbitrary to me, especially when you're going to start using words like orthodoxy and Christian fidelity, and do it about biblical ethics, right? So the difference is doctrine, of course, is what we believe. Ethics is what we do as a result of what we believe. So now you're broadening Christian orthodoxy into ethical categories. So if I'm a pacifist and I see that flowing directly out of the teaching of Jesus is nonviolence, right? And with way more clarity, perhaps than homosexuality. Why would I not then, on the basis of this, simply say, well, okay, good. If we're including ethical categories that seem really obvious to us, then why not others?
Yeah.
I don't see, number 3, I just see this as failing to acknowledge our hypocrisy and our double standards. Divorce in the Christian community is not mentioned. Domestic abuse in the Christian community is not mentioned. Pornography, adultery, none of that stuff is mentioned. It's totally focused on one specific issue, and I know they've done that specifically to focus on one specific issue, and I'm fussing at them because, but I'm trying.
To your point, it's arbitrary amongst all these other issues.
It feels that way.
Yeah.
If you were going to offer a series of statements regarding other issues, I'd still have problems with statementing, but it just would feel more congruent,
consistent.
Yes.
At least they're not holding one as more important than the other. Like, why narrow in on this one?
Right. Article 2, we affirm that God's revealed will for all people is chastity outside of marriage and fidelity within marriage. And again, chastity within marriage is just as important. So I'm not sure. I'm sure they know this, but it seems like it's not acknowledging there are many heterosexual ways of not living up to this standard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's the part that feels like it's missing. Article We deny that any affections, desires, or commitments ever justify sexual intercourse before or outside marriage, nor do they justify any form of sexual immorality. Okay, that's traditional biblical teaching. But again, it's so sterile. There's no. You haven't answered the main question of culture, which is how does this help you flourish? How does following traditional biblical ethics help human beings flourish? We just haven't answered that question. Article 4. Now this is where I start showing my bias. Okay, now this, I think they're smuggling stuff into this. So, we affirm that divinely ordained differences between male and female reflect God's original creation design and are meant for human good and flourishing. We deny that such differences are a result of the fall or a tragedy to be overcome. Now, what they're doing, this is the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, who has elevated your view on the role of women to be a first order issue, which I totally disagree with. But secondly, this is the language they use: divinely ordered differences. So what they're smuggling in here is the fact, and what they mean. If you ask them what they mean, divinely ordered differences is the view that's called complementarity, which is that men and women have designated roles in the home, in the workplace, and that's part of their DNA. So I feel like this is where I feel like it gets just a little sinister, not malicious or anything, but it's like, I just feel like you're smuggling stuff in, and you're making your view on this equal to the Bible's view on this, when there are other really sincere Christians who would disagree. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, and I just get off the boat. I don't care who you are or how right you are. The minute you do not allow room for dialogue or nuance, there's no nuance in this, right? It's just total. I mean, and or mystery or tension or nothing. I just don't. I don't see how this functions in a way that brings blessing or helps our witness to the world. And this is where I totally agree. Totally agree. I've got a bias, but I think the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood has really pushed this issue of female submission. They even argue that Jesus is eternally subordinate in the Godhead, which is totally heretical. So I'm out just because of this stuff.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Right. Totally.
Okay. Article 7. I have a problem with this. We affirm that self-conception as male or female should be defined by God's holy purposes in creation and redemption as revealed in Scripture. So we deny that adopting a homosexual or transgendered self-conception is consistent with God's holy purposes in creation and redemption. Now, this is what they're saying, it seems. So there are a number of very, very well-informed, passionate, well-spoken Christians who identify as gay and who believe that the Scriptures have called them to a life of celibacy. And what they use instead of chastity or celibacy is they use the phrase spiritual friendship. They want to be a community of spiritual friends. The companionship they long for, all of those things is found in spiritual friendship. And there are a number of scholars, a number of people who are just very viscerally and honestly living out the reality that they're same-sex attracted, and they're living under the lordship of Jesus in a way that calls them to chastity, celibacy. Mm-hmm. What this article has done is to say that even their identifying as gay is not biblical.
Right.
So to say, because, gay Christian, so that seems to be what they're going after. And I'm like, why would you alienate people who are holding and practicing the position you're advocating at great cost? None of you guys are freaking walking around with this struggle, right? Mm-hmm. But these other folks are identifying themselves as a gay Christian and saying part of my gayness is I'm sex attracted. Didn't choose this. But part of my Christian is that I choose to live a life of chastity in response. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. What you've just said We deny that adopting a homosexual or transgender self-conception is consistent with God's holy purposes. And I'm just like, well, okay, but think about all the other things you could say that about. Is identifying myself as depressed and anxious, is that consistent with God's purposes in creation and redemption?
Or saying I am an alcoholic,
right?
And I wrestle, and I every day I wrestle with it,
right?
And you know,
right. I'm just like, you sure you want to do that? Now the big one, Andy. The big one is Article 10, baby. This one. Yeah, this one we're gonna beat up on. So, Article 10, we affirm that it is sinful to approve of homosexual immorality or transgenderism, and that such approval constitutes an essential departure from Christian faithfulness and witness. An essential, right? So we deny that the approval of homosexual immorality or transgenderism is a matter of moral indifference about which otherwise faithful Christians should agree to disagree. Okay, so Denny Burke, the president of the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, declared anyone who persistently rejects God's revelation about sexual holiness and virtue is rejecting Christianity altogether, even if they claim otherwise. Okay? And so what he's doing is he's elevating someone's view of sex, marriage, and a complementarian view of male and female roles to the utmost importance of matters of faith. If you affirm gay marriage, or even if you believe that women can equally lead alongside men in the church, you are not a Christian. I mean, that, Burke, so he says this is a line in the sand. It is meant to shuffle people into who is in and who is out of Christianity, though the measure isn't. Now, he's not saying this.
Right.
The quote is from him is just a line in the sand. But essentially what he's saying is that in the article and then in his clarification of it, that this is now a test of whether or not you are a Christian. And so let me get this straight. Somebody who affirms that Jesus is Lord, has trusted him for salvation, who struggles with same-sex desires, acts upon them, but confesses them and repents, identifies as gay. I mean, that person's not a Christian, even though they may affirm all the historical markers of orthodoxy. That just seems crazy. You and I, Andy, and Vox would be considered heretical,
right?
According to this,
yeah,
because we believe that there are sincere Christians who disagree on this, and so to do that, so according to this, we are not faithful Christians or faithful witnesses. I mean, truly, according to this thing,
right?
Because we actually believe there are people who love Jesus and who are gay,
right?
And again, I'm assuming this whole time that they're right in their theology. Like, that's a whole other conversation. But
yeah.
Let's just assume for the sake of argument they are.
That if it's true. Yeah.
I mean, the way some of this is stated is so unbelievably harmful. And so, it's like your view of gender and sexuality is now of equal weight with your view of the Trinity or your view of salvation. I mean, that seems to be what they're saying. And I'm like, yes, these are important issues. Yes, biblical fidelity matters. Yes, there's a great deal of confusion in the Christian community, and the Christian community itself is splitting over this stuff. Got it. We need clarity. No question. This is about the worst way it can come. I think all it does is further the polarization and the alienation. How do you build bridges out of this thing?
Right.
How do you freaking build bridges out of this?
Right.
There's no way.
Right. Well, it's crazy because in the same way, like, during the political season, it kind of became that. I mean, I think even since that time, there's now just deeper assumption from folks on the outside who look in. Oh, Christian. Oh, okay. So you love Trump. Like, it's just a straight line,
Totally.
It's like, And that's already caused a massive, division as far as a lot of folks are concerned for their views on that. I mean, that's the thing. This just took another hot knife and just kind of, sliced it right down the middle again.
Right.
And it's just
right. But not even. I mean, they're going after clearly progressive Christians.
Yeah.
But even Christians that wouldn't be considered super progressive, like I don't consider myself super progressive.
Yeah, neither do I.
We're ruled out,
right?
Unnecessarily. People like Wesley Hill, who again wrote a book called "Washed and Waiting," and he literally just tells a story about being same-sex attracted and wrestling with the call to celibacy and obedience to Jesus. In his view, that guy's out of bounds too. I mean, so I just think it's foolish.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and I can hear all the objections, and I have seminary friends who've signed this, and I got it, but I just think that if you're looking at the world from a culture war perspective, this is the move you make.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at the world and trying to make Jesus beautiful, and to create a vision of life with him that leads to flourishing, that allows people to be in process, that starts with grace before truth, this is about the worst thing you could do. I mean, it just does not help the cause. And at the very least, I feel like and we've said it before, just announcing the rightness of your belief does not absolve you from the responsibility of pastoring actual people through the believing process.
Right.
So I don't know, man.
Like, yeah, it's like it's like hard. Like I'm even bothered that the coalition of coalition, what's the B word?
Biblical.
Thank you. Yeah,
manhood.
Biblical. Well, yeah, that the coalition of biblical manhood and womanhood even exists, and furthermore, now this other coalition exists. Like, to me, it's just like, what are all these? It's just a continuation of these creation of coalitions of banding, and it's just that much more exclusivizing. It's all running in that direction, and
yep,
yeah.
So, again, I just feel like I need to reiterate the disclaimers. Is this important? Yes. Is there a place for statements? Yes. Would I sign this? No. Nor would I sign the Denver one. Mm-hmm. Because again, it gets into this binary of affirming, non-affirming. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, I know it's easy for me to say as a white male, I got it. But I don't think the binary is the way of Jesus. I think Jesus doesn't, no one encounters Jesus and gets 100% affirmed or not affirmed, right? You just, and I don't think it's our job to order the sanctification of other people.
Right.
So, I mean, again, I feel like I'm such a huge advocate for the way we're approaching, things at Vox. But I just think we're onto something that is bigger than this. Bigger than the complete acceptance of everything, or bigger than the complete rejection of everything. There's nuance here. There's tension. There's messy relational difficulties in the midst of all this. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, again, great respect for some of the signers, but I would never add my name to that, not even remotely. So I know this will raise lots of questions, and feel free to send them our way. People ask us all the time. We even got a question this week from our church. Hey, what's your stance on homosexuality? We don't have a stance on homosexuality. I don't think it's a topic. I think it's people. And we're not in the business of stancing. I think we got to get out of the stancing business. So if people say, what's the view you hold? I say our church holds this view, that we want to be a place where focused on Christ and centered around the Eucharist, affirming and non-affirming Christians can learn, or people, they don't even have to be Christians, affirming and non-affirming people can learn to love and listen to each other. So our community is folks that are openly gay, and our community has folks that think that being openly gay is sinful and would sign this thing in a second. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the power of what Jesus does. So I just think there are other ways to do this than stancing and statementing, if those can be verbs now. So it's 10:22.
Wow.
To Andy, it's 7:22.
Yeah.
So you're on fire.
But I was up at 4 my time.
Whoa.
So.
Whoa, Andy Bear.
Just still.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's actually good because that means you'll be sleepy here.
Yeah. I actually get sleepy around this time at home anyway.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I just don't get to go to sleep because I'm putting children to sleep.
Yeah, Mercedes, please don't hear that Andy's going to go to bed in the next 10 minutes, sleep for 12 hours. It's going to be glorious. And it's good sleeping weather, man. It's like in the 50s.
I know, huh?
Oh, buddy. All right, so it's so great to be in the same room with Andy. I can't even tell you how great this is. And it's so great to be a part of your journey, wherever you are. And again, the goal is never to convince you to think like we do. Our goal is always to make Jesus beautiful. Our goal is to stimulate conversation and thought and be safe to talk about anything. And so in some way, shape, or form, be a blessing to you as you are on your own journey. So to that end, please communicate with us on Twitter, on Facebook. What's our website, Andy? voxpodcast.com. Andy was yawning, just as if to prove his tiredness.
Timing. The timing on that one.
And we've got voxoc.com. And for those of you that signed up for the email list for VoxOH, we don't know what that means or whatever. I'm still involved with VoxOC, of course. But we realize we've got probably 40 or 50 people here who are interested in something.
Yep.
So we'll be making some moves just to at least meet up and get to know each other here in the next couple of weeks. So anyway, that's what we got. Andy, anything you want to add?
Oh man, I mean, at this point, no. I guess I would have said this before you started closing, but I've seen a lot. I've seen this come up a lot more lately. Is that people are saying like Jesus would have taken a stance, or or Jesus does take sides. Like I've seen that pop up a lot lately, like in different kind of things. And it's interesting. And what they're arguing is that, like, yes, Jesus has always taken the side of the oppressed. He's always taken the side of the marginalized, of those who are hurt and that. And it's interesting because you could say that even the Pharisees whom he was challenging was under the oppression of Rome. So in a way, while he's challenging the Pharisees, he's still standing in the cultural oppression of the time.
Right.
So, but I just think it's interesting how people are doing that, because I think there's some people are hearing more of kind of a middle road voice like this, in a way that kind of suggests like, well, like, let's not just take sides here. Let's really look at what this is.
Right.
And then that's even coming under attack for people who are taking sides and being like, well, you can't do that. I mean, this is a problem. You got to pick a side.
Right.
So it's, I've seen that statement floating around lately.
Yeah. So let's say we take a side.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I do think Jesus seems to affirm the Genesis teaching about marriage in Matthew 19 when he's asked about divorce. I think Jesus was shockingly conservative in his theology and thoroughly progressive in his practice.
Yeah.
And that's where I go, okay, so let's say you are conservative in your theology. Mm-hmm. How you hold your theology is more important than the theology you hold, according to Jesus and according to the New Testament. Right? Love above everything, put on love, according to Paul. Imitate God. I mean, it's and then that's where I just get off the boat on the taking sides thing. Okay, let's say you've taken a side. I have an opinion on this stuff. I totally have a side. Mm-hmm. But what do you do with that? And how do you use that? And what's that do to you? If I'm the biggest sinner in the room, if I'm the guy with the log and someone else has a speck in their eye, right? Mm-hmm. It's a totally different conversation than just me pronouncing things and taking sides. And so I think absolutely there are sides to this. And I think absolutely Jesus would I think confront both sides of this issue. We did a whole podcast on I think Jesus would confront the affirming crowd, and I think Jesus would confront the non-affirming crowd. Nobody gets off scot-free. Particularly if they're convinced they're right.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, because I was looking at this and I was thinking about that, and I'm like, listen, if I had signed something 10 years ago with how I tried to explain my grand theology and what I think of everything, I'd be going back now being like, yeah, I wasn't on with some of that, and it's just interesting to me, because it's like, if the whole idea of maturity does exist, then there's going to be things we're working through,
right.
And it's just, now it's like, but the problem is, it's like, this is the internet now, like, that's in print.
Right.
So it's like, okay, who's going to be on that list? I mean, immediately, I think I already saw, like, a number of people all of a sudden started to question, oh, wait, I signed this thing, but wait, Article 10 that's starting to seem a little bit fuzzy with what this means. Like,
wow. So
there's a little bit of that now happening, of some of the signers going a little gray on, like, really? Oh, wait, I didn't really understand.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's floating around a little bit. So it's just interesting, because why does this thing need to exist, and why now? And then for everyone that jumped on there, it's like, okay, in 10 years from now, if you feel differently about this, then, well, what does that mean, though? You signed this statement that they apparently think is going to exist for eternity, right?
Yeah.
So what's the present of trying to capture this moment then, with all of this approval from all of these people that are seen as important in this time, like as if it equates to, all of the former creeds that we have that are,
That's right.
hundreds of years old now. So those are all the things that have been rolling around in my head. I'm just, it's a huge why. And I read the statement of, like, here's why now. And to your point, it was just like, well, we had been planning it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, how outrageously socially tone deaf was it to just be like, yeah, let's release it now.
Right. Oh.
I just don't understand why it's like, you could have, like, literally a week later would have felt like you kind of cared about what was happening when you released it.
I don't know, man. I get a buddy of mine, just said, it seems like you care more about winning people to Jesus than being faithful to kind of Scripture's teaching on some of these big issues. And I'm not sure that's an either or, but I just wish more people cared about that bit.
Right.
About and again, not that I'm some huge and wonderful, I am huge, but not that I'm some wonderful representation of Jesus to everybody. I'm not saying that at all.
Jesus.
Oh my Lord. But it just seems, when I read Paul, so much of what drove him was making Jesus beautiful.
Yeah.
Was like furthering the gospel, and I just don't know how this does that. Seems like it makes the job harder in some ways. So much love to you, and as you are processing this stuff, if you've not read it, go ahead and read it. We'd love to hear what you think. My brothers and sisters, Andy and Mike, in the same room, reunited. Love it. Andy's, again, setting up some stuff so we can Skype, and it'll feel like we're in the same room. It'll be glorious. But for now, Andy, why don't you do the blessing, dude, just to prove you're here. Do you remember it?
I usually do. I'm just, let's see if my brain's working right now.
All right.
It's 10:30. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Yeah. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you.
Boom.
May the Lord lift up his countenance to you, and may he give you peace.
Amen. Andy, good job. Yeah, I add the end these days.
Yeah, I like that. I like that little biblical addition.
Yeah. Come on. I'm expanding orthodoxy.
Yeah, if you can add them, why can't they?
Right. My brothers and sisters, we love you guys. Thanks for letting us be a part of your life. Till next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Vox Podcast. Learn more about us at voxpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at the Vox Podcast, and now support us on Patreon at patreon.com/VoxPodcast.